Come on, Rachel, drink this soup. It was cold. I opened my eyes and saw a tattered calendar with the portrait of a great leader hanging on the crumbling mud wall. December 29th, 1977. I had been reborn. I would never forget this day. It was the day that changed the course of my fate. This was the first year the college entrance exam had been reinstated. It was also the day after I received my admission letter from the Department of Electronics and Mechanical Engineering at Capital Institute of Technology. My mother walked in carrying a bowl of soup, pushing open the drafty wooden door. A gust of cold wind followed her inside, sweeping through the broken-down house. My heart ached. I knew. My own mother had drugged the soup. I could never forget what had happened on this very day in my past life. Back then, a lame and ugly old bachelor in our town named Walter Harris had caught a glimpse of my younger sister Emily while collecting ration coupons. One look, and he became obsessed. He took out all the money he had, 30 yuan, and demanded to marry her. My mom, greedy for the money but unwilling to part with Emily, decided to make me take her place. Clutching my admission letter, I fell to my knees and kowtowed until my forehead was bloodied, begging her not to send me. I promised I would study hard, make lots of money, and give her and the family a good life. But she kicked me aside, snatched away my admission letter, and shouted, "I've suffered raising you. Don't even think I'll keep paying for your education. You're marrying Walter Harris, and those 30 yuan will give us a better life. That money will buy me some peace and help your sister marry into a good family with a proper dowry." That very same day, a young educated man from the village came with another marriage proposal for a high-ranking military officer from the city. He had served in battle, killed enemies, and was a decorated national hero. Coming from a powerful and prestigious family, he was said to have some psychological trauma from his missions and had grown extremely picky, which was why he remained unmarried. His parents thought city girls were too delicate and couldn't handle his temper, so they were looking for a pretty and capable rural wife who could take care of him. They even offered to support her through college. The young man said to my mom, "Both your daughters are beautiful. Just choose the one who's more sensible." To my mother, it was like winning the lottery. She immediately pushed Emily forward and didn't hesitate to drug me. That night, she had Walter Harris carry me off. By the time I woke up, it was already too late. And so, in that life, Emily went to Capital Institute in my place, and eventually married that city officer, Charles Liu. Now, staring at the bowl of soup in front of me, and at the mother who had spent her entire life playing favorites, I said coldly, "I'm not drinking it." She stepped forward and tried to force the bowl to my lips. "Drink it," she snapped. My chest tightened with pain as I resisted her. In a fit of rage, she slapped me hard across the face. "Don't be so ungrateful." I grabbed her raised hand and glared at her. "I won't let you ruin my life again. I'm not getting married, I'm going to college." Infuriated and humiliated, she opened her mouth to curse me again, but just then, Emily burst in, grabbing her hand to stop her from slapping me again. "I'll marry him," Emily said, dragging our mother's arm back. She shot me a glance, her expression sharp and calculating, and in that moment I knew she had come back too. My mom was stunned. She had always favored Emily, to the point where she didn't even try to hide it. I glared at Emily and said loudly, "Emily, are you insane? That's Walter Harris, the most infamous old bachelor in town." Mom turned to me and snapped, "The city officer's last name is Liu. I think his full name is Charles Liu. He lives in a big house, has power, influence, and money. His family is even willing to pay for your college. Once you graduate, you'll marry him, and your life will be smooth from then on." At the mention of Charles Liu, Emily's face turned pale, then red. Her expression twisted with something complex and difficult to describe. She was terrified of falling into that same trap again. "I don't want to talk about it," Emily said impatiently. "Mom, just stay out of it. Trust me, life with Walter Harris will be way better. Let Rachel marry Charles Liu." She shot me a smug glance, clearly enjoying herself. Right at that moment, Walter Harris came swaggering in like he owned the place, grinning shamelessly. Emily didn't even look back. She walked out with him without hesitation. My mom, fuming with rage, grabbed my admission letter and tore it to pieces. "You're going to the city with Li Zhiqing right now. Forget school. You're marrying Officer Liu immediately." Now that Emily had secured herself a wealthy husband, I was the only daughter left. My mom just wanted to get her hands on the betrothal gift from the Liu family as soon as possible. She tossed the shredded admission letter into the fire pit by the Kang bed. It burned into ashes right before my eyes. I knew in that moment, I had no other choice but to seek refuge with Charles Liu. I needed his help if I wanted any chance of continuing my education. That afternoon, I left with Li Ziqing without a shred of attachment. We met Charles Liu at his family's old home in the center of the city. The house, though clearly inherited from older generations, was large and impressive, if a bit worn by time. Still, it had an undeniable air of dignity. Li and I stood in the center of the spacious living room. When Charles Liu walked in, he was tall, straight-backed, and expressionless. His sharp eyes locked onto me for a long time before his tightly pressed lips finally parted. "Rachel," I nodded. Li Ziqing quickly stepped forward with a flattering smile. "Rachel is well known in our village, hardworking, capable, and very sensible. She's beautiful too, just not dressed up. She even studied in secret and managed to get into Capital Institute. Smart girl. You'll have smart kids with her." Charles Liu waved his hand, clearly growing impatient. "I'll figure something out about your request to return to the city. Thanks for handling this." He glanced at me. Li Ziqing, no fool, knew it was time to leave. "I'll be troubling you then, Officer Liu. I'll head back to the village. I've still got chores waiting." "No need to stay," Charles said with his usual commanding tone. Once Li was gone, I suddenly felt nervous about what I needed to say next. But for the sake of my education, my future, I summoned the courage. "Officer Liu," I said, "my admission letter to Capital Institute. My mom burned it. Could you help me?" "You're already negotiating with me?" he snapped, his brows furrowed tightly as his piercing gaze bore into me. I immediately shut my mouth. In my past life, I knew how miserable Emily had been after marrying him. That talk about minor psychological trauma? In truth, it was full-blown PTSD from his combat missions. He was unpredictable and emotionally volatile. Seeing me fall silent, he finally spoke again in a low, steady voice. "There are 3 conditions." I held my breath. "First, I cannot stand the sound of crying or screaming from women. Second, I will meet all your material needs, but don't expect any affection from me. Third, you must accept Xiaoyue and her son living in this house." "Xiaoyue?" I was stunned. Xiaoyue was his childhood friend. She had married Charles Liu's brother. That brother had died saving Charles during a mission. Piecing things together from what I'd overheard from Li Ziqing on the way here, I suddenly understood why the Liu family wanted a rural bride. No respectable city girl would ever agree to those 3 conditions. This marriage was entirely arranged by his parents. Charles clearly wasn't willing, but he was a devoted son and obeyed out of duty. In my past life, Emily hadn't cared about studying. All she wanted was to marry Charles Liu as soon as possible. She dropped out halfway through her freshman year and married him. Neither she nor my mother had ever mentioned the 3 conditions. They must have agreed to them in secret, but were clearly uneasy about Xiaoyue. Fearing future complications, they rushed the marriage. Because at the very moment Charles mentioned Xiaoyue, I saw a rare gentleness flicker in his eyes. And with Emily's selfish, jealous nature, even after marrying him, there's no way she could have endured that. He and my mother both cared deeply about appearances. With his childhood sweetheart and her son living in the house, they couldn't possibly say anything about it publicly. All anyone on the outside knew was that Charles Liu often hit his wife. They had no idea what really happened behind closed doors. At last, I saw the full picture. This had to be the true reason why Charles and Emily's marriage had been a complete disaster. But I didn't care about those 3 conditions, because I never intended to marry Charles Liu, and I had no plans to take a single penny from the Liu family. I smiled slightly. "Officer Liu, I know this marriage was arranged by your parents. You're probably not that willing deep down, but you're a devoted son. You'd never go against your parents. You're also at the age where marriage is expected." Charles's eyes flickered. He hadn't expected me to speak to him so directly, so calmly. "Officer Liu," I continued, "if you're not willing, we can take things slow. Maybe after I graduate, something will change. Maybe we won't have to go through with this marriage at all." He was even more shocked now. He had assumed that a village girl like me would be overjoyed just to be matched with someone like him, clinging to the opportunity no matter what. He had no idea I'd already lived a whole life once before. In my previous life, though I never got to attend university, I still climbed to the peak of wealth and power. I'd seen the world, and from what I learned, a woman can only rely on herself. Not on her husband, not on her sons. I knew better than anyone what marriage could become, what men could become. People used to say I had a lucky fate, that I'd somehow landed on my feet by marrying Walter Harris, the lame and ugly old bachelor no one else wanted. No one could have predicted how that story would turn around. Walter, as it turned out, was born under a lucky star. He was shrewd in business, knew how to make money, and gave me a life of luxury and wealth. But what no one ever knew was that I was the one who had built that fortune for him. Back then, he was a gambling addict and had racked up debt outside. He tried to take the only money I had saved for myself. When I refused, he beat me, then tried to snatch my small radio to sell it off. That radio was the only thing of value my father had secretly left me before he passed, something he'd hidden from both my mom and Emily. During our struggle, the radio was smashed. I sat there, blood dripping from the corner of my mouth, holding the broken radio in my arms, crying. That radio was the only warmth I had in this world. The only way I had to connect with the outside world. That night, I stayed up under the weak glow of a kerosene lamp, eyes swollen from crying, carefully piecing the broken radio back together. I had no idea I would actually fix it. I'd always been fascinated by electronics and machinery since I was a kid. That's why I had applied to study electrical and mechanical engineering at university. And right then, it hit me. This could be a way to make a living. I started walking from house to house around town, asking if anyone had a broken radio, TV, or refrigerator. I repaired them for free at first, just to practice. After a few months of honing my skills, I began charging small fees. As more families could afford appliances, business kept growing. Eventually, Walter saw that I had found a solid way to earn money. Under my insistence, he gave up gambling and started learning repairs with me. Life got better. He treated me better. We made our first real income by fixing small appliances for people. We became the first family in town to save up over 10,000 yuan. When the economy opened up, we moved to the city and opened a small repair shop. Then we became the richest family in the area during the 1980s, worth millions. Later, we founded our own electrical appliance brand, turned it into a national chain, a household name, and entered the ranks of the global Fortune 500. The company's assets grew to tens of billions. I gave Walter 3 sons, but as I spent more time raising the kids, I had less energy to focus on the business. Walter persuaded me to step away, to come home and take care of the boys full-time. I agreed and became a stay-at-home mom, fully handing the business over to him. We had built everything from scratch. And when Walter finally stood at the top, wealthy and powerful, in charge of both the company and our fortune, he changed again. He began to resent me for being an uneducated housewife, for being a woman from the countryside. And once he became a big boss, day after day, Walter was out chasing women. He got involved with pretty young secretaries and tangled up with powerful businesswomen. The 3 sons I had raised with my own hands all went abroad for their studies. They'd seen the world, and when they returned, they began bending over backward to please Walter, all so they could inherit more of his wealth. One by one, they started to look down on me, said I came from a humble background, said I was out of touch with society, said I embarrassed them. Even my grandchildren clung to Walter's side, some of them even trying to cozy up to the women he kept outside. On the surface, I lived a life of wealth and status, but inside, I was dead. In the end, I died depressed and hollow. In this life, how could I still hold out hope for others? How could I waste my talent again, building a future just to hand it over to someone else? All I wanted now was to study hard, master real skills, and take control of my own fate to pursue a life of value that I chose. Since Charles Liu didn't truly want to marry me and was only doing this to fulfill his parents' wishes, it was clear that Xiaoyue was the one he really loved. That worked out even better for me. I looked him in the eye and spoke my mind without hesitation. My admission letter was burned by my mother. Officer Liu, If you're willing to help, if you could vouch for me to the school. I just need the chance to study. Then you'll have 4 full years before we need to marry. You can take that time to think about whether this is what you want. I don't think your parents will pressure us in the meantime. Charles stepped forward, getting close. Rachel, are you trying to back out of the engagement? Or is it that you can't accept one of the 3 conditions? And this is your way of threatening me? He didn't give me a chance to respond. Which one is it you can't accept? He demanded. Xiaoyue, there's nothing between us. If you want to be part of the Liu family, you'll need to have some tolerance. Charles kept pressing me, and he looked genuinely angry now. I didn't understand where this hostility was coming from. I was trying to think of how to explain when a sharp, cheerful voice rang out behind me. Shi Chen. I turned around and saw a fashionable, stunning woman walking in with a glowing smile. She held a little boy's hand and her eyes were full of affection as she looked at Charles for a long moment before turning to size me up from head to toe. That was Xiaoyue. Charles's tense expression immediately softened at her arrival. This is raised blandly. She's from the countryside. Xiaoyue's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered and offered me her hand. Hi, I'm Claire Yu. Charles pulled her back a little and said gently, She just came in from the village. Her hands are dirty from farm work. The little boy climbed up onto Charles's lap and said sweetly, Daddy Charles, Mommy Claire, can we go to the amusement park now? Charles nodded. All right, let's go. The 3 of them left together. But just before going out the door, Charles turned back and looked at me coldly. About what you said, I'm not backing out of the engagement, but we can wait until you finish college before getting married. I'll have someone from the school write a verification letter for you tomorrow. Then he shouted, Miss Wong, prepare a guest room for her. I quietly let out a breath of relief, then held another one in. I could finally go to school. But what did he mean? He wasn't backing out of the engagement? After a long day, I was too exhausted to think about it. Originally, Li Jiqing had told me I'd be living at the Liu family's house from now on. And honestly, I had nowhere else to go. I was penniless. For now, I had no choice but to stay here temporarily. Once school started, I'd move into the dorms, get a part-time job, and slowly repay Charles for his help. Then we'd be even. I got into college smoothly and was preparing to move out of the Liu household. But unexpectedly, Charles refused. He was completely firm. I wasn't allowed to leave. Officer Liu, I told him, thank you for helping me get into school. I won't forget this favor. I'll work to repay it. He smirked slightly. Rachel, the costs of living here, you can pay those back with money. But getting you into college? That's a huge favor I've done for you. How do you plan to repay it? I froze for a moment. You're not allowed to move out, Charles said. Since you'll be staying here and I'm often not around, you'll help take care of Claire and Evan. For 4 years. Otherwise, I could just as easily let you lose your place at school. You know I have that power. Charles Liu, what a cruel man. He didn't need to hurt me physically, he went straight for the heart. He wanted his so-called fiancé to work like a servant for his beloved White Moonlight and her son. Thinking back to my past life, with Emily's competitive and proud personality, no wonder that marriage had ended in a disaster. But for me, it didn't matter. Getting to go to school was already the greatest blessing. As long as I could repay Charles for the favor, even serving in his household as a so-called fiancé didn't bother me. After a few seconds of silence, I nodded. All right. Charles's tightly knit brow seemed to ease a little. He murmured to himself, 4 years is enough. But I hadn't expected Claire Yu to make things so difficult. After classes, I had to work part-time at a repair shop. When I got back, Claire always had a never-ending list of chores waiting for me. Every night without fail, she demanded I wash her and Evan's feet. I endured all of it until sophomore year. One day, I got my period, and my stomach was killing me. Claire was once again barking orders at me, and I couldn't take it anymore. I said, the water's already heated and brought over. You can wash yourself. As soon as Evan heard that, he kicked the basin over. Bad woman. You're bullying my mom. Claire instantly pulled him into her arms and scolded me. My son grew up without a father. He's sensitive. You don't need to say things like that in front of him to hurt his feelings. I stared at her, stunned, like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. I was just about to argue when I heard footsteps behind me. Charles had walked in. The moment Claire saw him, her whole demeanor changed. She put on a pitiful face and said softly, "I knew it. Ji-Chen, you only asked her to take care of us because you didn't want us to suffer. But she hates us, I can tell. That's why she deliberately boiled the water so hot and scalded Evan. We don't want to trouble her anymore. Evan and I will move out tomorrow. I'll talk to you about it later." Charles looked down at the spilled water, the overturned basin, Evan crying at the top of his lungs. Without asking a thing, he grabbed my arm and slapped me across the face. "Rachel, Evan's father died saving my life. We owe this mother and son everything. You're in college now and still don't understand basic gratitude? Acting like a spoiled child? Don't be so cold-hearted." I stared at Charles in disbelief. Claire held the crying Evan in her arms, her face full of pitiful grievance, but I could see the satisfaction behind her eyes. Clutching my stinging cheek, I glared at Charles. Word by word I bit out, "Charles Liu, if anyone should repay a debt of gratitude, it's you. If you want to return that favor, you take care of them. I agreed to repay your help getting into college, but I never agreed to be bullied by them. What gives you the right to treat me this way?" Charles answered coldly, "Because you're my fiancé. You marry the man, you marry his burdens. And marrying me? You're already reaching higher than you deserve. What, now taking care of my benefactor's family counts as abuse to you? I didn't know you were so delicate." As soon as those words left his mouth, "You're my fiancé." Claire's face changed. She gently nudged Evan, and Evan immediately ran over and clung to Charles's leg. "Mommy is your real fiancé. She is. That woman's bad." Claire hurried over and scooped him up, pretending to scold him in embarrassment. "Kids say the darndest things. Ji-Chen, he's getting so out of hand lately. I don't know what's going on in his little head." She glanced at me, but there was a smug smile tugging at her lips. Charles let out a deep sigh, his eyes softening as he looked at that mother and son. Then he turned to me, his expression once again cold and stern. Charles scolded me and turned to leave. I watched his figure disappear into the distance. I knew deep down that he wished Claire Yu could be his fiancée, but the Liu family would never approve of her, and I was just the woman his parents had forced him to marry. For the past 2 years, I had asked nothing of him. I made no demands, caused no fights, and never stirred up trouble. That was the only reason things hadn't turned into a disaster like they did between him and Emily in the last life. We had been able to coexist in peace. But now, with Claire and her son living here, even this fragile peace was starting to fall apart. Over these 2 years, Charles's parents, who lived elsewhere, would occasionally visit to see me. They treated me kindly, but they had no idea I intended to break off the engagement after graduation. That made me feel a bit guilty. I'd become one of the top students in the entire school, even representing the university and winning the national championship in electronic mechanical engineering. I'd become a modestly well-known figure across the country. The Liu parents adored me even more. But I continued to refuse any money from the Liu family. My advisor, Professor Li Mengwen, saw how hard I worked between classes and part-time jobs. Out of sympathy, he bent the rules to let me into his graduate research project, which allowed me to earn a bit of extra money. There really are good people in this world. Still, I knew I had to move out of the Liu household as soon as possible. And now, under these circumstances, even if I did leave, the university and faculty could protect me. Charles probably wouldn't be able to sabotage my education again. Right as the relationship between me and Charles had reached a freezing point, and I was making serious plans to move out of the Liu house, my mom and Emily suddenly showed up. Walter Harris had gambled away everything they had. When he wasn't drinking, he was gambling. And when he wasn't gambling, he was beating Emily. At first, Emily had still clung to hope, dreaming that Walter would make a fortune by fixing appliances like he had in the previous life. She wanted to sit back and enjoy a luxurious life. But all she saw was him leaving early, coming home late, and demanding she find ways to help pay off his gambling debts. Eventually, after yet another violent beating that left her bruised and bloodied, Emily fled to our village and cried to my mother. She said Walter had threatened her, that if she didn't get him money, He'd kill her. My mom felt sorry for Emily, but she no longer had anything left to give. That's when she remembered that since I hadn't officially married Charles yet, the Liu family hadn't paid the bride price. She'd been afraid to offend them, so she hadn't dared ask directly. She had someone reach out to me through a go-between, and I told them only, after graduation, we'll talk about marriage. Then she tried going to Li Jiqing, hoping to get more information. Li reassured her, saying the Liu family was well off and reputable, they wouldn't shortchange her. But such formalities took time and couldn't be rushed. My mom had to drop the matter for a while. Now, desperate for Emily's sake, she came straight to the Liu home to ask in person. When they arrived, Charles greeted them courteously, and I temporarily put our Cold War aside and came out with him. Emily looked like she had aged 10 years. Her face was pale and thin, covered in bruises. She looked haggard and beaten down. Seeing me living in the Liu household, even if it wasn't a glamorous life, it was certainly not the chaotic mess she had expected. Compared to her current situation, I was doing far better. I don't know why, but Charles even gently wrapped his arm around my waist. When Emily saw that, her face turned stormy with resentment and disbelief. As soon as my mom sat down, she shamelessly asked, "Officer Liu, are you two still not planning to get married? My daughter's been living here all this time, no certificate, no ceremony. People are starting to talk." Charles glanced at me. I was just about to speak when he suddenly took my hand and said calmly, "Of course we'll get married, but not yet. I respect Rachel's wishes. She wants to wait until after she graduates." That shut my mom right up. When she realized it was me who didn't want to get married yet, she turned on me and pointed at my nose. "Shameless girl, living with a man without marrying him. You should think about your reputation. What will people say? That you're filthy? Cheap?" Maybe it was my imagination, but I thought I caught a flicker of pain in Charles's eyes as he listened to my mom's nasty words. He frowned and raised his voice sharply. "She's been staying in the guest room. The Liu family does not tolerate this kind of vulgar, low-class abuse. If you keep talking like this, get out." My mom immediately shut her mouth in fright. I turned to look at Charles. A faint sense of gratitude had just begun to grow in me, until Emily, unable to make sense of Charles Liu's warmth, respect, and even protectiveness toward me, started stirring trouble. This wasn't the cold, violent man she had known in the previous life. Trying to spark conflict, she suddenly said in a deliberately sarcastic tone, "I heard the Liu household still keeps a widow and her orphaned child living here." That was, of course, something she remembered from her past life. Charles frowned and glanced at me, clearly assuming I had gossiped about him behind his back. His face darkened. "There are no widows or orphans in the Liu household," he said flatly. "Only people we owe a great debt to." Then he turned toward me, clenching his jaw and whispering, "Rachel, I gave you plenty of face in front of your mother and sister, and this is how you repay me? Going around talking about my household like that? Seems you really can't accept Claire and Evan being here." His words immediately reminded me of that slap he gave me not long ago, completely unprovoked, simply for siding with Claire and her son. Any gratitude I had started to feel instantly vanished. The humiliation and bitterness surged back in full force. "I never said anything," I told him coldly. "Believe whatever you want. Whether or not I can accept your benefactor and her son, that's not my place to decide. Officer Liu, we were only supposed to be in each other's lives for 2 more years and never meet again." Charles had never been defied so openly. The veins on his neck bulged with fury, his fists clenched tight. Emily saw the opportunity and smiled smugly. Her scheme had worked, but I hadn't planned on staying in the Liu household forever anyway, so I didn't care. She came over, pretending to be friendly, and took my hand, saying to Charles with fake sweetness, "Brother-in-law, my sister's a bit timid but very smart, and stubborn too. Please be patient with her." Charles brushed his sleeve angrily and stormed off. My mom, realizing Charles had walked away before she even got the chance to ask for money, panicked. She hadn't grasped what had just happened. To her, it was clearly my fault for upsetting Charles. She rushed at me and grabbed my collar. "This is all your fault. Now go get some money for your sister. Give it to Walter Harris." I looked at her coldly. "Why should I?" She reached out and tried to grab my throat. "Because I gave birth to you. I raised you. I tore her hand away. You raised me? It was Dad who raised me. After he died, I was the one who supported this family. Everything you and Emily wore and ate, I worked and paid for it. Everything I earned growing up, you took from me and gave to Emily. When I was 10, you gave her my winter coat. I had nothing but a thin, torn sweater in the middle of winter. Then Emily broke out in a rash and you accused me of tampering with the coat to harm her. You beat me half to death? You don't remember that? Well, I do. So hear this. I'm officially cutting all ties with both of you. From now on, take care of yourselves. The moment my mom realized she could no longer get anything out of me and dared not direct her rage at the Liu family, she collapsed onto the floor, shrieking. Ungrateful daughter, think you're better than us now? You got yourself a rich man and forgot your own mother? You heartless girl, you'll get what's coming to you. Just like in the last life, she thought Charles was just bad-tempered. She didn't know he had post-traumatic stress disorder, and that the thing he hated most was the sound of women screaming and crying. Her hysterics pushed him over the edge. Already furious with me, he now lost his last shred of patience. In a fit of rage, he called for the house staff. Get them out of here, he ordered, and don't ever let them set foot in the Liu household again. As she was being dragged away, Emily lost control. She shouted at me, her face twisted with disbelief. Rachel, what trick did you play? Why is Charles defending you? Why is Walter Harris now just a useless drunken gambler? I just smiled. Emily, I said, you can't build your life depending on someone else. Still sobbing, she spat out, aren't you doing the same? Aren't you depending on Charles? On the Liu family? We'll see. Your life won't be so easy either. I shook my head. I don't rely on anyone. I'll be fine. Then I turned and closed the gate behind me. They had no one to turn to in the city, nowhere to go. Left with no choice, they returned to the village. I went back to the guest room in the backyard to continue packing my things. As I passed by Claire Yu's room, I overheard her comforting Charles. Don't be mad, Ji-Chen, she cooed. That's just how country people are. Greedy, ungrateful, with no sense of propriety or class. When it really counts, they're just a pile of useless mud. Don't dirty yourself over this. Then I heard her say, Here, I made your favorite, osmanthus honey cake. Have some and calm down. She had just called all country people worthless mud, and that obviously included me. Charles let out a deep, heavy sigh. He didn't say a word. In front of Claire, he never defended me, not once. He only said softly, Xiaoyue, you're always so understanding, so well-mannered. I smiled to myself. How perfect. A match made in heaven. I didn't linger. I turned and walked quickly back to my room. Tomorrow, I would officially move out of the Liu house and back into the campus dorms. It wasn't until a week later that Charles realized I had moved out. He showed up at the university just as I was stepping out of my professional studies class. The security guard called for me at the gate, saying someone was looking for me. When I stepped outside, I saw him leaning against a military green Jeep parked near the campus entrance. The moment he spotted me, he crushed out the cigarette at his fingertips. I stopped a few steps away from him. He walked up to me briskly. Come back with me. I shook my head. That won't be necessary. You promised to take care of Xiaoyue and Evan for 4 years, he said. I shook my head again. I'll find another way to repay what I owe you, but I can't take care of them. There are so many servants in that house. Why do you need to use that mother and child to punish me? I asked. Why? I stared directly at him, still unable to understand. Charles looked at me, his lips parting slightly as if to speak, but the words didn't come out. I looked at him and said sincerely, If you really care about her, why not speak to Uncle and Aunt Liu? Fight for your happiness. There's no need to keep punishing yourself and others. It was heartfelt advice, but he suddenly bristled with anger. I've told you over and over, he snapped. Xiaoye and her son are the wife and child of someone who saved my life. The Liu family owes them everything. It's only right that we take care of them. I looked at him deeply. Everything you've done for her. Are you sure it's just repayment? Or are you using the idea of gratitude to justify what you really feel inside? His face turned red with fury as he pointed at me. You're a college student now, even if you came from the countryside. Why are you still so narrow-minded, like some ignorant village woman? I found his words so absurd I couldn't help myself. For the first time, I called him by his full name. Charles Liu, I said evenly, firmly, as his equal. First of all, I have no feelings for you, so it's not about being jealous of Claire or not accepting her. Second, yes, I came from the countryside. But people from rural places are still people. Some are good, some are bad, just like city folks. You don't have to keep using where I'm from as a weapon to shame me. And finally, I continued, even if I'm not much, I'm honest. I know what I want and what I don't. Unlike you, who says one thing and feels another, you deceive yourself and hurt everyone around you in the process. Charles Liu, a person can't be too greedy. You can't have everything. I thought he would explode with rage, but instead I watched his clenched fist slowly loosen. His cold expression fell under the soft sunlight of early spring, and something unexpected, something like defeat, flickered across his face. After a long pause, he finally spoke in a low voice. "Rachel," he said, "did you really never consider marrying me?" I hesitated for a few seconds, then slowly looked up at him. That brief silence seemed to darken his expression even more. He suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm, hard. The pain shot straight through me. I tried to pull away. "I never have," I said. "I've never once thought about marrying you." Charles roared, "Don't you dare say never again." I had never seen that kind of desperation or that kind of fury in his eyes before. For a split second, I faltered, wondering if he truly had feelings for me, but I quickly crushed that ridiculous thought. How could he? The tenderness he showed Claire Yu, I had never once seen that side of him myself. Spring was blooming beautifully along the roadside, but the seasons would keep turning. I still had so much more to do with my life. I extinguished that last flicker of foolish hope. After that, Charles started showing up at school from time to time, always using one excuse or another. But every time he came, he still couldn't stop talking about Claire. I avoided him whenever I could. I didn't want to get entangled anymore. The debt I owed him for getting me into college, and the guilt I felt about breaking off the engagement, I chose to repay to his parents instead. I knew Charles was busy. Claire and Evan were still living in the Liu household. After all, Evan was the child of the man who saved Charles's life. His parents wouldn't speak against the arrangement outright, but I could tell they disapproved of how Charles kept them so close under the pretense of gratitude. They preferred to live alone and didn't return to the Liu house often. Knowing how lonely that must be, I often spent the money I earned from part-time work buying them thoughtful gifts. Whenever I had free time, I visited to keep them company, watching TV, playing chess, or simply chatting. It made them happy. As my senior year neared its end, Mr. Liu turned 50. He invited me back for a family dinner to celebrate. I felt grateful he considered me part of the family. I spent all the money I had earned from work to buy him a special birthday gift. Holding that present, I returned once again to the Liu household. I helped Mrs. Wang in the kitchen. Mrs. Liu loved my sweet and sour ribs. Meanwhile, Claire sat with them in the living room, chatting sweetly. She kept nudging Evan toward them, coaxing him to call them Grandpa and Grandma. Again and again, putting on her usual eager charm, Mr. and Mrs. Liu politely humored her. Everything was fine, until dinner. Mrs. Liu praised my cooking, saying the ribs were just how she liked them. Suddenly, Claire let out a dramatic scream. "There's a cockroach in the sweet and sour ribs." That's when it hit me. Why Evan had been running in and out of the kitchen earlier, something he'd never done before. The cockroach had been planted. Claire had made her son put it there. Charles frowned at me. "It's your idea of helping to cook for my mother's birthday? And this is the result?" Claire immediately stood up and took the dish away, putting on her usual perfect act. "Ji-Chen, don't blame Rachel. She worked hard all night. Even if she didn't do a great job, she tried her best." I let out a cold laugh. What a performance. The villain playing the heroine again. Charles slammed his chopsticks onto the table. "Rachel, why do you always say things that lack grace? Why do you always act without class?" I took a deep breath and was about to respond when Miss Yvonne Liu looked at Claire, then at Evan, then at her son, and finally at me. She had figured it all out. She snapped at Charles. "Why are you yelling at Rachel? If you've got such high standards, go make something yourself. All you do is bully her when it's time to eat." I hadn't wanted to cause trouble, especially not on Mrs. Liu's birthday. I'd been planning to speak with his parents soon about ending the engagement, but Charles wouldn't let it go. "Claire's right," he muttered. "You'll always just be a pile of mud from the countryside." Now, not only did he not defend me, he joined Claire in humiliating me. Well, if I was so lowly and unwelcome, there was no need to cling to this any longer. I set my chopsticks down and stood up. Bowing deeply to Mr. and Mrs. Liu, I said, "Thank you, Uncle and Auntie, for all your kindness. Without you, I wouldn't have made it into the city." Then I turned to Charles. "And thank you, Officer Liu, for helping me prove myself and giving me the chance to attend university." I looked him in the eyes for a moment. Then I added clearly and calmly, "I've thought about it, and I believe the best way to repay your kindness is not to marry you, so you and Claire can finally be together, the way you've always wanted." Then I turned back to Mr. and Mrs. Liu. "Uncle, Auntie, please consider this a formal request. I respectfully ask to dissolve the engagement between Charles and me. I'd still be honored to be like half a daughter to you, if you'll have me. But not being able to become your daughter-in-law in this life, that's my loss," I said sincerely. "I hope Uncle and Auntie will give me their blessing." Mr. and Mrs. Liu were stunned on the spot. Charles had never been so humiliated before. He let out a cold laugh. "Fine. The engagement is off, effective immediately. I'm going to marry Claire." He turned around and stormed out in anger. Back at the table, Claire suppressed a faint, almost imperceptible smile of satisfaction. As I was leaving the Liu residence, I overheard Charles's parents berating him. "You'd throw away a decent girl like her and instead cling to that widow and her son? You ungrateful son, you've lost your mind. Shameless, you've embarrassed the whole Liu family. Where do we even put our faces now?" That moment reminded me again, whatever kindness the Liu parents had shown me wasn't truly for me as a person. It was just because, for now, I happened to be the most acceptable fallback option for a daughter-in-law. If Claire had been in my place, she would have been the one they favored. But I'd lived one life already. I no longer clung to naive beliefs about human nature. People chase after what benefits them. That's how the world works. I no longer resented that. I just wanted to live true to myself. 1 month later, as the only graduating student from Capital Institute selected for a national project, I signed a confidentiality agreement with the country's top aerospace program and departed for a classified research base in the south. From that moment on, I disappeared from Beijing. By the time Charles realized I was gone and searched every corner of the city for me, I was already deep in training at the southern base, part of a team working on the development of manned spaceflight rockets. Professor Li Menghuan left me a message, telling me Charles had come looking for him, begging to know where I had gone. All he said was, "She's gone south." I don't know how Charles managed to find the location of the classified base, but he showed up anyway, storming in without regard for protocol. The security team immediately detained him. After verifying his identity and confirming his background, they escalated it to the base leadership. He wasn't punished for trespassing, but he was ordered to return to Beijing at once. At age 35, when our country's first test spacecraft successfully launched, the nation rejoiced in celebration. And I, Rachel, was one of the 3 core engineers behind the project, a milestone in our manned spaceflight technology. As the rocket lifted off and soared into the endless night sky, I stood in silence beneath the vastness of space, filled with gratitude. The universe was immense, and for the first time, I knew this was where my life's purpose truly lay. I had no regrets. Later that night, Professor Li called to congratulate me. He brought up Charles again. He said that, in the end, Charles had indeed married Claire, and their relationship had become the talk of the town. Perhaps because Professor Li knew me better than anyone else from school, Charles eventually sought him out, drinking quietly and pouring his heart out. He told him that from the very first moment he saw me, he knew I was different. He said he'd fallen for me long ago, but he couldn't let go of Claire. He admitted it was all his own fault, his own selfishness. That I'd been right when I said he was too greedy, wanting both at once. He said at his mother's 50th birthday dinner, when he heard me truly break off the engagement, he'd panicked and lost control. In his anger, he'd shouted that he would marry Claire, defying his parents for the first time. The moment he said it, he regretted it. Only after I graduated, left, and cut all contact, vanishing into the southern base, did he finally realize that his heart no longer had room for anyone but me. But Claire had seized on his angry declaration and used it to her advantage. She stirred up public gossip, fueling speculation about their ambiguous relationship. The disciplinary committee summoned Charles, warning him about his conduct. Pressed to give an explanation, he had no choice but to go through with the marriage to Claire. Because of the scandal, Charles was demoted. His career, once so promising, took a steep dive. While others around him continued to rise, he sank lower and lower. Claire resented him, often blaming him for his failures. He grew sick with anger and stress. His parents distanced themselves from him, refusing to speak to him anymore. His PTSD worsened. He and Claire never had children. In the end, Charles came to resent Claire deeply. Whenever his illness flared up, Charles often experienced hallucinations. Just like in the previous life when he had beaten Emily, he now laid hands on Claire. The two of them were constantly caught up in petty, endless domestic arguments. Until one day when Claire once again provoked him, mocking that he was useless, he lost control and accidentally struck her so hard he blinded her in one eye. Someone with an agenda reported him. That incident ended Charles's career for good. He was forcibly committed to a long-term care facility. Claire moved into the old Liu family estate with her son, Ethan, living off what remained of the Liu family's assets. She didn't care about Charles or his parents. She said the Liu family owed her, that this was her rightful due. At the facility, when Charles was disoriented, he would murmur my name again and again. When he was lucid, he'd lash out at himself, cursing his own worthlessness, blaming himself for losing a good woman, for letting his only shot at a happy life slip away. Hearing all this from Professor Li Menghuan, I let out a long sigh. I couldn't help but feel a little pity for Mr. and Mrs. Liu. When I returned to Beijing to visit them, they were already hunched and frail, both struggling with illness. When they saw me, they gripped my hands tightly, their cloudy eyes brimming with tears. I couldn't hold back my own. But every person has their own fate, and we all must follow the path laid before us. As I left their home, I happened to run into Li Jiqing, who had come to visit as well. He told me that, years ago, after introducing me to Charles had been very pleased. Not long after, he helped Li Jiqing return to the city. But Charles had specifically asked him not to tell me. He said I needed to be tempered to become a better future wife for a high-ranking official. A proper Liu family daughter-in-law. He said 4 years was the right amount of time, enough for both of us to repay our debts. For me to take care of Claire and Ethan, to repay the debt owed to Rachel's late father. And after those 4 years, he would let go of the emotional burden, relocate Claire and Ethan elsewhere, and finally live a peaceful life with me at the Liu estate. I just found it laughable. I shook my head. Charles never understood me. In this life, I never wanted to cling to anyone. I never dreamed of becoming someone's wife, someone's daughter-in-law, someone's mother. From beginning to end, it was all just wishful thinking on his part. Li Jiqing also told me that he'd heard from folks back in the village. Walter Harris, now a criminal, had been arrested for soliciting prostitutes. Emily contracted a difficult illness from him and was now considered unmarriageable. She cried every day, her life in utter misery. All her anger was directed at my mother, blaming her for failing to give her a better future. When they saw me appear on national television, standing among the honorees at a state commendation ceremony, red flags waving, streamers flying, applause thundering, they couldn't believe their eyes. My mother cried as she screamed at Emily, insisting that her current misery was all her own fault for not listening. She still believed that if Emily had obeyed her and married Charles, then this shining, celebrated life should have belonged to Emily. What she never understood was this. In any life, light or dark, storm or sunshine, you must steer your own course. If you hand your fate over to others, you can only surrender to whatever comes. So they resented me. They blamed each other. And together, they spent the rest of their bitter lives in that small, forgotten village. As for me, my life was only just beginning. When my colleague Ethan Joe confessed his feelings for me, I accepted. But I made it clear, I would continue striving for my dream, dedicating my life to the great mission of national revival. I would leave my footprints on that long and difficult path. I told him I wouldn't be tied down by domestic trivialities or traditional family roles. Ethan simply nodded and said he understood. That was exactly what he admired about me, and he would support me wholeheartedly. In this life, I, Rachel, belong to no one but myself. Ethan and I never had children. We spent our lives together, side by side, contributing everything we had to the aerospace industry. Even now, we're still on the front lines, fighting for the stars. We moved in rhythm with the times, creating with joy and determination a world that changed by the day, full of new life and energy. We shed sweat and tears, stayed through the darkness, and welcomed the sunrise. We bore witness to each launch that reached for the moon and every satellite that pierced the sky. As we looked up into the vast universe, I felt no regret in this life. Until one New Year's Eve, I received a call from the nursing home. An old man named Charles Liu was nearing the end. He said he had always hoped to see me one last time. I was stunned for a moment. That name belonged to a distant memory. After a long sigh, I asked Ethan Zhao for his thoughts. With his support, I decided to go. Charles was frail and gaunt, lying on the bed, speaking with the last of his strength. December 7th, 1977, he said. My unit was assigned to secure the first reinstated National College entrance exam. I was patrolling the exam site and saw a girl run in at the last moment, shivering from the cold, breathless. But there was a light in her eyes I'd never seen before. I fell in love with her at first sight. I did everything I could to keep her close. In my last life, she was replaced by her sister. In this life, I finally got her, but I was afraid. Afraid she would leave the Liu family once she succeeded in her studies. I knew how much college meant to her, so I threatened her with it, forbidding her from moving out. But I was also afraid she'd turn out like her sister, bitter, arrogant, unreasonable, filling our marriage with failure and misery. So I kept testing her, observing her, pushing her, trying to figure her out. Charles grew more agitated as he spoke, his voice rising and falling, faltering in places. It was all my fault. I was too greedy. I missed my chance. I pushed her away with my own hands, he whispered. I stared at him, shaken. He reached out with a trembling hand and asked, Rachel, all my life, I've wanted to ask you face to face. If Claire hadn't been there, would you have chosen me? Would there have been even the slightest chance you'd have stayed and spent your life with me? Before I could answer, his hand fell silent. His breath stopped. He was gone. Charles Liu never got his answer. Even as he left this world, he never understood that the things he clung to so tightly were never important to me at all. The blazing flame of ambition in my heart had always burned brighter than anything else. That was my truth. That was what truly mattered. To stop the wedding between Jason and me, his childhood sweetheart Emily deliberately fell into the water. But she didn't expect that the buckle of her life jacket wasn't fastened properly. What was meant to be a fake drowning turned into a real emergency. Jason, groveling, pleaded, Emily and I grew up together. I can't just stand by and watch her drown. Olivia, I know you can swim. Please help Emily. We'll all be grateful. Under everyone's moral coercion, I jumped into the sea to save her. But saving someone and swimming are two completely different things. Out of fear, Emily clung to me and dragged me down with her, almost drowning me. After she was rescued, I ended up with a serious lung infection from nearly drowning and was bedridden. Jason used my poor health and the need for rest as an excuse to take away all my shares in the company. Once he gained full control, he filed for divorce. And not long after, he and Emily disappeared together. I was so furious that I coughed up blood and died. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Emily struggling in the sea. Jason was already holding onto the railing, about to jump. I silently took 2 steps back. In this lifetime, let him save his beloved childhood sweetheart himself. Someone fell into the water. Help. Save her. Help Jason. Please save me. Glub glub. The chaos around me grew louder. There were frantic footsteps, screams for help, and shouting. The noise snapped me back to my senses. I looked down, confused, and saw that I was wearing a white wedding dress. It was a dress I was all too familiar with, the one I had custom-made overseas just for my wedding with Jason. I had actually been reborn, to the very day of our wedding. I looked up and saw a scene I recognized all too well. Emily was desperately flailing in the sea, and her life jacket, which should have been on her, was floating just out of reach. The more she struggled, the farther it drifted. As soon as Jason heard her cries for help, he dropped me, his bride, and rushed onto the cruise deck. He stepped onto the railing, about to jump in. I followed him out, and the moment I saw this, I instinctively reached out to stop him. I knew Jason couldn't swim and was actually afraid of water. When he was a kid, he had fallen into a river and nearly drowned. I heard it was Emily who called for help and saved him. That's why he had a special kind of feeling for her. But even so, Jason still chose to hold our wedding on a cruise. Later, I found out it was Emily who suggested the cruise wedding in the first place. Even the accidental fall into the water had been planned by her long ago. Jason's mother never liked Emily and strongly opposed their relationship. Jason had gone on hunger strikes and even attempted suicide, but ultimately couldn't defy his mother. He was forced into a blind date with me. He said he loved me, but deep down, the one he loved most had always been Emily. And Emily never wanted to give up on Jason either. In order to ruin our wedding, she went to great lengths, even risking her own life. She wanted to prove her importance in Jason's heart and make me back down on my own, to voluntarily call off the wedding. What a moving, passionate love story. If only they hadn't treated me and my family like fools, I might have even given them my blessing. But once Jason set his eyes on my company and saw how weak I was, he changed his strategy. Emily choked on another mouthful of seawater. The more she struggled, the more the water poured into her nose and mouth. She never expected that her life jacket would come loose. I lowered my head and sneered coldly, stepping back a few more paces. In this lifetime, not only would I not go into the water to save anyone, but I would also make sure they suffered the consequences of their actions. Jason had already climbed over the railing. Just as he was about to jump, he suddenly froze. He stared at the churning waves, and sweat instantly beaded at his temples, streaming down his face. His breathing became erratic. He leaned closer to the railing and looked around in confusion. When Jason spotted me standing behind him, his eyes lit up. Olivia, help me up first." I saw him trembling all over. So he was still afraid after all. And to think I once believed true love could conquer time and all obstacles. "Olivia, I remember you can swim. Please." Before Jason could start using guilt again, I shouted, cutting him off. "Jason, I know you and Emily were childhood sweethearts. I know you grew up together, and I know you can't bear to watch her drown. But I'm the one you're supposed to marry. You can't even swim, and you're still gonna jump in for her? Jason, have you ever once thought about how I feel? How could you treat me like this?" I was hysterical. My voice drowned out anything Jason might have said. While I was catching my breath between shouts, Emily's mother rushed over, limping as she came. She had worked as a housemaid for the Carter family. Jason's mother had passed away early, and his father was left disabled. So Emily's mother had been working for them while raising her daughter in the Carter household. She had always dreamed that her daughter would marry Jason. When I used to visit their house, she constantly played dirty tricks to embarrass me. But now, she had no time to manipulate anything. She threw herself in front of Jason and begged, "Jason, please. I only have one daughter. You've known her since she was a child, please save her." Guests began to crowd around us, all chiming in and urging Jason to jump in and rescue her, just like they pressured me in my previous life. When they heard that the girl drowning had once saved Jason's life, they climbed right up onto the moral high ground, spouting off thoughtless comments. I put on a panicked expression, pretending to be just as helpless and worried. Jason looked at Emily, who was now barely keeping her head above the water. I noticed that someone had already called for the crew to bring out the lifeboat to perform a rescue. That wouldn't do. I let out a sigh, turned to the guests, and said, "Please stop pressuring Jason. He's not the kind of man who fears death. But even if the person drowning once saved his life, that doesn't mean he should throw away his own to repay that debt." Then I turned to Emily's mother, fanning the flames. "Ma'am, don't force Jason like this. After all, he's a wealthy young master. In his eyes, your only daughter is just the daughter of a housemaid." Anger and humiliation flashed in her eyes, and the next second, her knees buckled, and she dropped to the ground in front of Jason. Jason couldn't handle it anymore. Just as Emily began sinking, her strength failing, Jason gritted his teeth and turned around, trying to climb back over the railing. Not jump, but climb back. That's right, he never had the courage to actually jump in. He trembled as he clung to the railing, muttering through quivering lips. It's not that I don't want to save her. I really can't swim. If I jump, I'll die. So, he wouldn't save her himself, but he had no problem forcing others to do it. He cared about Emily's life, he cared about his own life, but the one life he never cared about was mine. At that moment, I had only one thought. He had to go down. He owed that much to the version of me from the last life. I shouted, Jason, come back up. You're afraid of water, but I'm not. I'll go save her. But unlike last time, I didn't lift my gown and prepare to dive in. Instead, I removed the crown from my head and, using my gown as cover, charged into Jason. The sharpest part of the crown jabbed into the base of his thumb. He cried out in pain, and because his grip was already loose, his hands flinched back and his entire body fell into the sea. My gown got tangled around the railing, stopping me from climbing any farther. Jason, don't. I reached out as hard as I could, but I couldn't grab hold of anything. Jason flailed his legs mid-air in a panic, then landed squarely on Emily's head. A massive splash erupted from the surface of the sea. The corners of my lips curled up, just like the waves, then quickly drew back again. By now, the crew had lowered the lifeboat into the water. Under the expectant gazes of everyone on board, the lifeguards swiftly pulled both of them out. Although the cruise ship had a medical room, the doctor had taken the day off, just like in my last life, which was why I hadn't received treatment in time. But this time, it was their turn to be unlucky. I collapsed beside Jason, sobbing as if my heart were breaking. I know you love her, but we were about to get married. How could you be so willing to throw me aside for her? Jason, if you didn't want to be with me, you could have just told me. I'm not stopping you two, I said. But why choose to die together at our wedding? Those same guests who had just urged Jason to save her were now all silent. Their ears perked up, every one of them straining to catch the drama. Even the lifeguard performing CPR on Jason paused for 2 seconds. After basic emergency treatment, both of them were out of immediate danger, but still unconscious. Emily was in better shape than Jason, as she had taken the time to learn how to breathe underwater before her stunt. Jason wasn't so lucky. He was the one who truly fell by accident. He had always been afraid of water. The moment he plunged into the sea, he opened his mouth in panic and passed out instantly. Seawater filled his mouth and nose. He briefly woke up choking, only to lose consciousness again. The amount of water the lifeguard pressed out of him was enough to fill a bathtub. I watched him spit up blood-tinged seawater, then calmly wipe my nose with the edge of my wedding gown. With the groom now in that state, of course the wedding had to be called off. We were already in international waters, so we could only wait for the rescue helicopter. And I was genuinely praying for Jason now. If he died just like that, it'd be letting him off far too easy. The pain, the illness, the betrayal, and humiliation I endured in my past life, this time he was going to taste every bit of it. I knelt outside the changing room for 2 hours, hair down and wedding gown dragging, looking the part of a heartbroken bride. Everyone was deeply moved by my display of devotion. Finally, the helicopter arrived and flew them both to the hospital. That afternoon, I went straight to the emergency room with my bridesmaids. Emily had passed the critical stage, but hadn't woken up yet. Looks like Jason really hit her hard when he fell. In my previous life, by this time, she had already been sobbing in Jason's arms, saying, "It's my fault, I was just feeling emotional about your wedding," and went out to the deck for some air. Jason had held her tightly and comforted her, saying, "It was Olivia who insisted on jumping in. She overestimated herself. No one forced her." But in this life, I stood on the outside, and Jason was still in critical condition. The moment Jason's mother saw me, she rushed over, hand raised to slap me. "If it weren't for you stealing my son, he never would have insisted on having a wedding on a cruise. He's been afraid of water since he was a child. This is all your fault. If not for you, my son wouldn't be lying in there." What a joke. It was clearly her son's idea, yet the moment things went wrong, she needed someone else to blame. Her hand was raised high, but before it could touch me, All four of my bridesmaids stepped in to block her. They weren't my close friends. I had hired them specifically to keep Jason's groomsmen from messing with my real bridesmaids. But now, these four girls were finally proving their worth. They all pointed at Jason's reckless behavior, abandoning the wedding to jump into the sea. "Don't talk like he was being noble," one of them scoffed. The woman in the water was the groom's childhood sweetheart. Anyone could tell from the way they looked at each other that there was something fishy going on. "Exactly," another chimed in. "You're blaming the bride for being abandoned, while your precious son jumped into the sea for another woman. Sounds like you're projecting your own guilt." "I've got the ship's surveillance footage right here," I said calmly. "Don't even think about framing the innocent. This is a wedding. Of course we had people filming everything." The crew, standing behind me, had recorded Jason sprinting to the deck, climbing the railing, and pretending he was going to jump. Then the camera panned to Emily, struggling in the water. My little move? Not a single frame of it was captured. After watching the footage, Jason's parents went pale. His mother bit her lip, still unwilling to give up, and pointed at the video to question me, her voice trembling. "You were right behind Jason. Why didn't you stop him? You could have reached him." I covered my face with both hands, looking devastated and utterly worn down, crying so hard I couldn't speak. Two of my bridesmaids knelt beside me, gently comforting me. The other two took a step forward and snapped. Like mother, like son. The guy's fooling around with another woman, and the mom's just out here blaming people. "Did you see how determined your son looked?" one of them shouted. "Who would dare stop him? And even if someone did, would you then say we pushed him in? Are you now going to say the bride couldn't keep his heart, and that's why he jumped? The little tramp who dragged him into this mess is lying unconscious in the room next door. Why don't you go slap her instead?" Jason's mother had clearly overestimated herself, thinking she could take on 4 women at once. She almost fainted from the rage. A nurse finally came out and sternly told everyone to stop making noise in the hospital. I glanced at Jason's mother, who was clutching her chest, clearly overwhelmed, and felt nothing but satisfaction inside. That old woman was an accomplice in Jason's betrayal. In my last life, she had frequently visited me under the pretense of checking in, only to mock and humiliate me. Back then, I was already lying in a hospital bed, barely able to move. Jason had stood at the foot of my bed, hands on his hips, scolding me like I was a useless hen who couldn't lay eggs. He said I was half dead and still dragging his son down. He even waved a photo of Jason and Emily in front of my face to provoke me. He laughed so proudly. "Look how perfect Emily and my Jason are together. They've only been back together a short time, and she's already pregnant. Such a lucky child." He had conveniently forgotten that he was the one who had firmly opposed Jason being with Emily in the first place. He looked down on Emily's mother for being a housemaid and believed Emily was beneath them. Yet now, at the very moment he despised Emily the most, his only son had almost died because of her. I didn't stay in the hospital long. My 4 bridesmaids helped me change out of my gown. After witnessing their power earlier, I arranged a hotel for them and planned to keep them on the payroll for another 3 months. That same night, I opened a short video platform, edited footage from the wedding, and uploaded it. I paid special attention to the part where I knelt outside the changing room. The angle was perfect. Everyone who saw it said I looked like I was about to break into pieces. I even bought myself a trending topic. Then I turned off my phone and had the best sleep ever. I didn't wake up until noon the next day. I put on a bit of sick makeup, picked up the chicken soup I'd ordered through delivery, and headed to the hospital again, this time with all 4 bridesmaids. Perfect timing. Jason had just woken up half an hour earlier. Emily, apparently, had regained consciousness in the middle of the night. I knocked on the door to Jason's hospital room. Without waiting for a response, I barged in with the bridesmaids in tow. Jason was the only one in the VIP ward. He was lying on the hospital bed, eyes half open, staring blankly at the ceiling. He wore an oxygen mask. His bare chest was covered in ECG monitors. A blood pressure cuff was strapped to his left arm. An IV drip pierced the back of his right hand, and both legs were wrapped in compression sleeves to prevent blood clots. Most importantly, he had a catheter bag hanging at the side of the bed, and bubbles were rising inside. The grief I had rehearsed almost broke the moment I saw that bubbling urine bag. I quickly lowered my head and covered my face, my shoulders beginning to tremble. I had to cover up. I couldn't let Jason see how pleased I was. The bridesmaids rushed forward to comfort me, acting like Jason wasn't even in the room. Jason turned his head with great effort. The moment he saw me, fury filled his eyes. He ripped off his oxygen mask and tried to sit up in anger, but he was far too weak. The movement sent him into a violent coughing fit, his face turning bright red. After struggling to breathe, he finally rasped out, "Olivia, why? Why didn't you stop me this time?" His voice was hoarse, trembling. "You should have stopped me and then jumped into the sea yourself. And you stabbed my hand. You made me fall on purpose." His eyes were bloodshot as he slowly lifted his injured left hand. As he said this, a chill went down my spine. Could it be? Jason was reborn too? I bit down hard on the tip of my tongue. Pain shot through me, bringing me back to the moment. When I lifted my head again, my face was already streaked with tears. "Jason, what are you saying?" I whispered. "If you hadn't jumped first, I was already going to save her. And your hand, I didn't hurt you. Maybe you hit the railing yourself and forgot. Can't remember. Maybe you were underwater too long, it messed with your head." Jason stared into my eyes, as if trying to see through me. He enunciated each word carefully. "Olivia, you didn't stop me, because you were reborn too? You hate me for abandoning you in the past life, so this time, you want me dead?" The four bridesmaids exchanged looks, clearly thinking Jason had been brain damaged from too much water. But I knew exactly what he was talking about. I stared back at him with clear, unwavering eyes, not a shred of guilt in my heart. I wanted him dead, and I had every right to want that. Why should I feel ashamed? My expression was so resolute, I looked like I was taking an oath. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said flatly. Jason coughed again, shaking his head in disbelief like he was losing his mind. No, you were supposed to jump in and save Emily. Then you'd get pneumonia, and I'd take care of you. You'd be so moved you'd hand over your company to me. And once you were near death, I'd dump you, marry Emily, and have a kid together. Yes, this was exactly what he did in my previous life. Everyone said he was devoted to me and never left my side, telling me I should be grateful. They had no idea his only goal was the company my parents had left me. I loved him. I trusted him. And in the end, I lost everything: my money, my dignity, even my life. As for Jason, he gained both love and success. He married the woman he truly loved and lived happily ever after. Why? Why did he get to win? Jason couldn't see the hatred twisting across my face. He placed his hand on his forehead and murmured to himself, "Why would I jump in the water to save someone? Would I really end up like Olivia did in the last life, so sick it would have been better to die? No, I don't want that. I don't want to end up like that. If Olivia's still fine, how am I supposed to get her company? How am I supposed to spend her money and live a beautiful life with Emily? I regret it. I should have been reborn earlier. That way, I could have pushed Olivia into the sea myself." His resentment almost pierced through my chest. My hands clenched into fists. I was just about to lose control when the hospital door swung open. Emily was wheeled into the room. My eyes landed on her face immediately. From her left eyelid down to the corner of her mouth was a deep gash. I instantly thought of the crown, the one Jason had been holding when he fell. He must have slashed her face when he landed. So it did cut her. That $5,000 crown was worth every penny. Emily noticed my gaze and her face twisted with rage, like she wanted to lunge at me and strangle me right then and there. But she didn't even have the strength to support herself. She could only roll her wheelchair toward the bed, throw herself onto Jason, and burst into tears. "Jason, you're okay, right? You scared me to death. I thought I'd never see you again." Jason was far too weak to withstand her throwing herself at him like that. He curled up like a dying fish, immediately coughing again. The catheter bag started bubbling once more. Seeing those bubbles, I wasn't even mad anymore. It felt like a weight had lifted off my chest. At least this time I wasn't the one who ended up wishing for death. The bridesmaids wanted to step forward and tear apart the scumbag and his shameless lover, but I stopped them. No rush. Their retribution is just getting started. Emily clung to Jason's arm, still putting on a show. Jason, you're so good to me. If you hadn't jumped in without hesitation, I might have drowned. Then she turned to me with a fake sweet smile. Sister Olivia, I'm so sorry for ruining your carefully planned wedding. I hope you don't blame me. It's just that Jason and I have been together for so many years. I smiled and pointed at Jason's arm. It was pinned under Emily so tightly that the veins were turning bright red. Blame you? How could I possibly blame you? I said, and gently pulled my bridesmaids back a few steps. Only then did Emily notice. She gasped and started apologizing through tears, frantically massaging Jason's arm. I watched as Jason groaned in pain and his IV needle bent awkwardly out of place. I hummed a little tune as I walked out and headed to the nurse's station. There, I picked up Jason's medical report. Just as expected, pneumonia. But this time, it was worse than what I'd suffered in my last life. He also had pulmonary bleeding and signs of cerebral hypoxia. Even after all the trauma and betrayal, I still managed to survive for 5 years in my past life. Let's see how long Jason can last this time. Half an hour later, I returned to the room and laid out the full details of Jason's condition. The doctor says you suffered brain damage from the shock. Your mental capacity might be affected permanently. And your lungs, forget about any strenuous activity. You might not even be able to get out of bed again. I deliberately emphasized the last 2 words, useless cripple. Sure enough, Jason couldn't take it. He clutched his head in disbelief. Jason's fingers tangled in his hair as he slowly dragged his hands downward, letting out a howl of pain and frustration. I handed the diagnosis report to his mother, who had just rushed into the room. She exploded with fury. But this time she didn't come at me. Instead, she stormed over to the corner where Emily was sitting and slapped her hard across the face. You filthy little tramp. It's because of you that my son ended up like this. Damn it, why didn't you drown instead, Emily? Emily held her cheek in silence, tears streaming down her face, but her eyes turned toward Jason, hoping, expecting, that he would stand up for her. I stood to the side with my 4 bridesmaids, watching the drama unfold. With them by my side, even if Jason's mother wanted to lash out at me again, she'd have to think twice. Jason, meanwhile, was lost in his own world. The last shred of pity he had for anyone was long gone. He muttered to himself in a daze, No, it shouldn't be like this. This has to be a dream. It's a dream. It's not supposed to be like this. Suddenly, Jason dropped his hands and tried lifting his head. He looked at me with a gaze full of longing. Olivia, we're already married, right? Can you sell your company, use the money to help pay for my treatment? His parents owned a chain of supermarkets, but recent years hadn't been kind to retail. Still, they could afford his treatment if they had to. But even in this condition, Jason couldn't stop eyeing my company. The room fell dead silent. Even his mother froze for a moment. Worried I might say no, Jason quickly added, Once I recover, I promise I'll plan a brand new, grand wedding just for you. I'll make sure you become the happiest woman in the world. And of course, when I'm better, I'll pay you back everything from the sale, with interest. If I hadn't lived through everything in my past life, I might have been touched by his sincerity. I almost couldn't hold back. I nearly burst into laughter. Instead, I put on a conflicted expression and said, But look at you now. How can I leave and take care of the company? I'm your wife. I should stay by your side. Jason's mom narrowed her eyes, then quickly forced a warm smile. Olivia, sweetheart, there's no need for you to do the dirty work yourself. Then she turned and glared viciously at Emily, still crying in the corner. Some people need to start paying for what they've done. I wholeheartedly agreed with that. Jason's mom immediately ordered Emily to stay in the hospital room and care for Jason, completely ignoring the fact that Emily was still recovering herself. She said she'd been planning to fire Emily's mother anyway, so now this would be their chance to make amends. Of course, Emily didn't want to do it, but before she could protest, my bridesmaids all eagerly stepped forward and offered to take care of Jason instead. Seeing 4 tall, beautiful women willing to stay close to Jason made Emily panic. Jason needs me. I've taken care of people since I was little. My mom was a housemaid. I know what I'm doing. No one else needs to get involved. I sighed theatrically and reluctantly agreed to the arrangement. And so Emily began her painful journey as Jason's full-time caretaker. To stay up to date on everything happening between them, I even hired a young man with hospital connections who loved taking videos. Every day he sent me clips. At first, Emily seemed thrilled. She was eager to be alone with Jason and rekindle their bond. But Jason was practically bedridden, covered in medical devices. Forget intimacy, he couldn't even roll over on his own. Jason's mom, still bitter toward Emily for seducing her son, made no effort to hire a second caregiver. Emily had to do everything herself, feeding him, giving him medicine, staying up at night, and even changing his clothes and wiping him down. Since Jason had a cleanliness obsession. Worst of all, Jason couldn't use the bathroom on his own. Emily had to take care of everything. Even though she was the daughter of a housemaid, Emily had never really done dirty or tiring work growing up. She'd been raised alongside Jason, and at most she'd endured a few nasty remarks. But now, within just a few days, she'd visibly lost weight. She didn't dare complain to Jason's mom, so she went straight to Jason, sobbing. But she couldn't say outright that she didn't want to care for him. One day, she complained her hands were getting rough. The next, she was coughing and groaning, clutching her back. Jason wasn't stupid. He understood exactly what Emily was trying to do. But the look he gave her was becoming colder and harder to read. Until one day, after changing Jason's socks, Emily finally snapped. She threw the dirty socks onto the floor and began stomping on them furiously, bursting into tears. "They're filthy. They stink. Why should I be the one doing this? I didn't force you to jump into the sea to save me. Why is everyone blaming me?" She couldn't control herself. "I was in the water even longer than you, and I didn't end up like this, gasping from a few mouthfuls and now lying around like you're paralyzed. You're just completely useless." Jason, already feeling miserable, finally lost it too. He grabbed the fruit knife from the table and flung it at her. A new cut opened on Emily's face. She let out a sharp, terrified scream, clutching her cheek, which immediately drew in doctors and nurses. I don't know exactly how they settled things behind the scenes, but a few days later, the videos I received showed them acting like everything was back to normal again. Still, I noticed something. In some clips, Jason looked at Emily with a dark, sinister gaze that gave me chills. Jason's mom finally hired a professional nurse to care for him. Emily no longer had to deal with those messy tasks herself. I stopped watching their drama and turned my attention to rebuilding my company. Ever since my parents died in that accident, I'd been pretty hands-off with the business. Before I married Jason, he constantly brainwashed me, telling me to stop showing my face in public and settle into a domestic role. In my past life, I didn't resist. When my health declined, I handed everything over to him. Not this time. This company was the foundation I stood on. It was everything. I started digging through my memories from the last life, trying to recall who had turned their back on me the moment I got sick. Those people were the first on my cleanup list. I was afraid Jason might recover just enough to realize I never intended to sell the company. And once that happened, he'd definitely try something. After all, he'd lived 2 lives now. The money he tricked out of me in our past life had funded his comfort and luxury. There's no way he'd just give up. So I went in hard and purged the company top to bottom. I talked to the 4 bridesmaids. All of them came from families that favored sons over daughters. None of them finished school. They were sent off to work early. They didn't want to entertain guests anymore, but with no degrees, they struggled to find decent jobs. They all wanted to stay with me, so I brought them into the company. 2 joined the PR team, and the other 2 worked in sales. To my surprise, they actually managed to land a few deals. They were thrilled. So was I. It was a win-win. Meanwhile, Jason called me every single day to ask about the company. Maybe it was the lingering effects of his illness, but he seemed more desperate than ever to get his hands on my money. Sometimes, when I was unsure about certain senior managers, I'd casually bring them up and see what Jason had to say. He wasn't completely unaware. Now and then, he'd mention key events from our previous life. Things that hadn't happened yet in this one. When that happened, I just acted confused or pretended not to remember. If I really drew a blank, I'd make an excuse or change the subject. Even when I slipped up, Jason couldn't keep track. His brain just wasn't working right anymore. Half the time, He forgot what he'd said minutes later. Sometimes, I even had to remind him what he was talking about. That's how we passed the next month, both of us testing each other, dancing around secrets. Soon, it was time for Jason to be discharged from the hospital. I drove there myself to pick him up. I arrived more than an hour early and waited outside his room. I cracked the door open just a sliver, but neither of them noticed. Jason looked pale and thin, with dark shadows under his eyes. He seemed like he'd aged 10 years. He coughed nonstop, then spat onto the floor, and wiped the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand, cursing the hospital for being full of quacks. He used to be so refined, so elegant in speech and demeanor. But now, he looked like a completely different person. No, this was probably who he truly was all along. Emily was sitting right next to him, feeding him slices of apple she had just cut. "Jason, can you please tell your mom to stop yelling at me? It still hurts where she hit me last time," Emily whined sweetly. Jason glanced at the marks on Emily's face, both scars left by him. Even after a month of healing, they were still clearly visible. With a look of irritation, he shoved her away. "You've got some nerve saying that. If it weren't for you, would I be in this condition?" A flash of resentment crossed Emily's eyes. I watched as she shakily helped Jason to the bathroom. His shouting soon echoed from within. "You're the daughter of a housemaid, and you don't even know how to take care of people? Didn't your mother teach you anything?" Moments later, Emily's pitiful sobbing followed. Eventually, I brought both Jason and Emily back to the Tang family home. Jason leaned on Emily like they were the loving couple, while I walked a few steps behind them. As soon as we entered, Jason was surrounded by a group of people, his closest buddies. 2 of them had even witnessed the cruise incident. "Jason, we've been wanting to visit you in the hospital," one said, "but we've been swamped. Now that you're out, we thought we'd throw you a little party." Jason forced a smile and hugged each of them in turn. Whether or not the emotions were real, his performance was polished as ever. But the moment he sat down, he started coughing uncontrollably. His buddies all frowned. One of them, seated closest, quickly got up and fled to the restroom as an excuse. Jason clutched his mouth, his whole body trembling, whether from coughing or anger, it was hard to say. After a while, he finally caught his breath and weakly asked Emily to pour tea for the guests. They all clearly knew about Jason's relationship with Emily. While they called her sister-in-law with their mouths, they were all throwing meaningful glances at her behind Jason's back. I smiled and played along. After all, I was the one who leaked the time of Jason's discharge. My plan had always been to gather his old friends here. In the kitchen, I deliberately pretended to talk on the phone. "Yeah, all his friends are here. I heard a few of them come from families that own companies. Jason told me to make sure I treat them well. His parents will be coming soon with some family friends. Yes, they're going to introduce me to everyone." When I turned around, Emily had already vanished from sight. I returned to the living room with a smile. Emily was sitting close beside Jason, whispering in his ear. The moment Jason saw me, he pushed her away and took a few deep breaths. His condition had clearly left him with lingering complications. It was either coughing or shortness of breath. "Olivia, I left my ID card at the hospital. I really need it. Could you go back and get it for me?" His eyes darted nervously, but he insisted I be the one to go. I discreetly recorded our conversation, then smiled, grabbed my bag, and left. I had just reached the front door when a delivery guy arrived with takeout. I took a glance: seafood barbecue, deep-fried skewers, and a whole list of foods that people with lung disease were supposed to avoid. There were also multiple cases of alcohol, beer, baijiu, whiskey, everything. I smiled and drove back to my villa. Then I called the hospital and asked the nurse to help look for the lost ID card. After that, I lay down for a nap. I had a feeling tonight was going to be very exciting. 3 hours later, my phone vibrated non-stop. As soon as I picked up, chaos erupted through the receiver, screaming, crying, shouting, things being smashed. It all tore through my eardrum. Jason's mom shrieked into the phone, her voice hoarse and trembling. "Olivia, where the hell are you? Get to the hospital now, Jason's dying." I took a moment to adjust my voice, making it sound just the right amount of panicked and tearful. What happened? He was fine when I left." She cut me off. "Cut the crap and get over here." Then she hung up. This was my second time outside the emergency room. Emily was on her knees, hands clasped in prayer, or maybe in desperation. Jason's mother stood with her hands on her hips, face red with rage. The moment she saw me, she opened her mouth to yell, but I beat her to it. What happened? I just left and now he's in critical condition? What do you people even want from me? Are you trying to tear this family apart the moment I'm gone? My tone was so forceful it made Jason's mom flinch. She didn't dare meet my eyes. To save face, she quickly redirected her anger. She turned and kicked Emily, who was still kneeling. You were the one who ordered all that food and alcohol. You knew Jason hadn't recovered yet. Were you trying to kill him? Emily fell to the ground, revealing a fresh red handprint on her cheek. She tried to defend herself. But you and Mr. Tang were both there. Neither of you stopped Jason from drinking either. That set Jason's mom off again. She grabbed Emily by the hair and slammed her head toward the wall. I immediately stepped back, careful not to let any blood get on my clothes. Thanks to the doctor's efforts, Jason was brought back from the brink again. But this time, his mother had no intention of letting Emily anywhere near her son. She wanted me to stay and care for him instead. I refused, using the company's financial affairs as an excuse. I didn't return to the hospital again until 2 weeks later when Jason called me. His voice was so weak, he sounded like a dying old man. Olivia, why haven't you come to see me? I replied gently. I've been busy with fundraising. We're preparing to take the company public. Public? His voice suddenly spiked in pitch, triggering a coughing fit that made his lungs ache. Why would you take it public? Didn't you promise to sell the company to pay for my treatment? Do you know what the doctors told me? In my current condition, the only option is a lung transplant, but that surgery isn't fully developed yet. It's risky and requires a huge amount of money. Please, Olivia, I'm begging you. Help me. For the sake of how much I loved you. I turned my head to the side and replayed the most painful moments of my life in my mind, just to keep myself from laughing out loud. He said he loved me, and now that he had memories of our past life, he really knew he'd never loved me. Yet he still had the nerve to lie to my face. I told him calmly, a public company can sell at a much higher price. Jason got desperate. Come to the hospital, please. Let's talk through it in person. Of course, I had to go. The more miserable he looked, the better I felt. I grabbed a few fake documents I had prepared in advance and headed to his room. Jason looked like he'd been dried out by the wind, thin, yellowish, lifeless. Emily was nowhere in sight. In my past life, Jason was the one who took my life. Emily was his accomplice. Jason would pay with his life, and Emily, I wasn't letting her off easy either. I asked Jason about his condition first. He stared at me with dull, cloudy eyes. I gave his bony hand a gentle pat, then pulled out the documents and opened them in front of him. Jason's eyes lit up. They're really offering $1 billion for the company? Of course they are, I said. The company's future is very promising, but the acquisition can only happen after we go public. I showed a troubled expression. But you need money now, I'm afraid. Jason gritted his teeth. It's fine. Just move forward with it. My parents still have some money, and if it's not enough, I'll have them transfer ownership of the supermarkets. They've been losing money for years anyway. That was exactly what I'd been waiting for. He was still putting on the act of a devoted lover, swearing eternal love to me. And I played right along, pretending he was the only one for me. I even said we'd have 8 kids together, straight-faced. After all, we were both lying. Who was more innocent than the other? Then I changed the subject. By the way, where's Emily? I haven't seen her. You ended up like this for her. Even if your mom hates her, shouldn't she at least show some gratitude? Jason went silent. Of course I knew the real reason. A week ago, Emily and Jason had a huge fight. Emily had threatened to sue Jason for intentional injury because the Tang family was planning to fire her mother. I'd seen the video. Emily had thrown a fit in the hospital room, shouting, I saved your life once and now you're repaying me like this? We're even now, but what right do you have to fire my mom? She's old, her legs aren't good, and she won't be able to find another job. Are you trying to drive us both to death? I gently tucked the blanket over Jason's feet and sighed. You used to be so good to him. You bought him so many luxury gifts, but the moment you got sick and needed money, he vanished. Everyone knows people in your condition shouldn't drink, and yet he ordered all that food and alcohol. Wasn't that just to humiliate you in front of his friends? Or maybe. I paused, looking him dead in the eyes. Maybe he was hoping you'd die. Jason's fists clenched tightly. Seeing my words had hit their mark, I made an excuse about company matters and left. But causing a bit of chaos with Jason wasn't enough. I wrote an anonymous report accusing his family's supermarket chain of selling expired food and failing fire safety inspections. Very soon, both the Food Safety Bureau and the fire department launched investigations. The store was fined and forced to shut down for rectification. Just as they were preparing to reopen, I reported them again, this time for tax evasion. I only meant to discuss the Tang family a little, but I didn't expect to uncover more dirt. They'd been pocketing illegal commissions, issuing fake invoices, multiple charges stacked up. Jason's father, as the legal owner, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The supermarket license was revoked. After a string of heavy fines, Jason was moved from the VIP ward to a regular hospital room. He started calling me frequently, begging me to cover his medical bills. I was getting tired of making up excuses, so when he called again, I simply burst into sobs. "I've been scammed by a fake investor, Jason. I'm begging you, could you lend me the deed to your family's villa? Just as collateral. I swear I'll repay you double once I get through this. Jason, please. Please." Click. He hung up without a word. I tossed my phone aside and went back to enjoying the massages and snacks the girls were feeding me. That night, the photography-loving guy I'd hired sent me another video. In it, Jason had gone to find Emily, holding out his hand. "Give me some money. If not, return everything I ever gave you. The jewelry, the bags, and the house I bought you too. I can't stay in that shared room any longer. I need peace and quiet to recover." They snore and grind their teeth all night. Emily, of course, wasn't about to give anything back. She wheeled Jason toward the door. "I haven't even sued you yet for slashing my face with a knife. And you dare come asking me for money? My plastic surgery costs over $100,000. Everything you gave me is mine now. You have no right to take it back." Jason might have once been a man of status, but now, sick and weak, he was no match for her. She shoved him out the door in 2 swift moves and even slapped him on the way. "Get out. Don't come back, or I'm calling the cops." So much for their unbreakable love. Not long after, I got a call from Jason's mom. That narrow-minded woman had finally lost her fire. She now sounded completely deflated. She begged me, as Jason's legal wife, to sue Emily and take the house back. "That's marital property between you and Jason. If you file a lawsuit, that little tramp won't stand a chance." Jason also took the phone, his voice dull and broken. "I was blind. I didn't see who she really was. Olivia, help me get that house back. I just want to spend the rest of my life with you." Turns out, after Jason and I registered our marriage, he bought Emily a small villa to comfort her, worth over 5 million yuan. It was my property, and I had no intention of letting anyone else have it. The day Emily received the court summons, she called me to curse me out. I could tell right away why she'd done poorly in school, zero comprehension. So I gave her a quick crash course in legal basics, even kindly suggested she get a lawyer. After work that day, I saw her waiting outside my office with her mother in tow. The moment her mother saw me, she dropped to her knees and started wailing. Her cries quickly drew a crowd of onlookers. "Please, Miss Olivia, just let us go. My daughter didn't ruin your marriage with Mr. Tang. Don't force us to die. We're begging you." People all around raised their phones to record. Emily had clearly decided to weaponize public sympathy and internet outrage against me. Jason and his mother both dropped to their knees, kowtowing to me again and again. Even when the police came to take them away, they were still rambling about their tragic life stories and how I had bullied them. Just as Emily had hoped, public opinion started to shift in her favor. But when furious netizens stormed my Weibo account, what they found were all the videos I had posted before. There was Jason, my groom, jumping into the ocean on our wedding day to save her. There was me, kneeling outside the medical room, praying. Later, clips showed Jason lying in a hospital bed while Emily kissed his cheek and fed him fruit. There was even footage from the day Jason was discharged, where he asked me to fetch his ID from the hospital, only to stay back drinking with his buddies and holding Emily close. And finally, there was an audio recording. It was my dear mother-in-law and my ever-faithful husband telling me, the legal wife, to sue Emily and take back the house. The internet instantly turned on her. People were outraged, calling her out for being the real manipulator. "So disgusting," they wrote. "And she had the audacity to cause drama at that lady's company? If I were her, I'd wrap myself in plastic wrap before even stepping outside." So the groom was cheating with her all along? That explains everything. Was she really drowning or just acting? Why isn't the guy getting any hate? He ditched his fiancée and now wants his stuff back from the other woman? I thought the mistress would at least be pretty, but this face? What was he even thinking? Thanks to all this, Emily became public enemy number one. Some people even found out where she lived. Dead rats and pigeons were dumped at her doorstep. Her front door was spray-painted in blood-red letters, "Go die." Whenever she and her mom stepped outside, people pointed fingers. Some even threatened to run them over. In a desperate attempt to gain sympathy, Emily started live streaming. She showed childhood photos of her and Jason, and told stories about their innocent, youthful love. But instead of gaining sympathy, she dragged Jason down with her. So he's the real trash behind all this? People said. He wanted both women? What a joke. Jason couldn't stay in the hospital anymore. People kept sneaking in to take photos or try to interview him. Even with increased security, some still scaled the walls. Patients in the same ward began complaining. Eventually, the hospital asked him to leave. After all this chaos, Jason's health declined even more. He called me, begging me to drop the lawsuit. "I didn't think Emily would go that far," he wheezed. "She used to be so sweet and gentle." "What did you do to her, Olivia? What did you say to turn her into this?" His mind seemed completely muddled, switching between rambling about our past life and whining about his miserable present. I didn't hang up. I just set the phone aside and went on with my day. An hour later, I picked it back up and heard him sobbing softly on the other end. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. Where did it all go wrong?" But me? There was no way I dropped the lawsuit. The court session proceeded as scheduled. I demanded that Emily return the villa and everything Jason had given her after we were legally married. Emily had a meltdown in court and even assaulted a bailiff. She was detained for 15 days. I immediately sent people to clear out all her and her mother's belongings from the house. That same day, I put the property up for sale. By the time Emily got out of detention, the villa had already been sold. She rushed to the Tang household, trying to play the pity card with Jason again. But as soon as she started her emotional speech, Jason's eyes rolled back and he collapsed. After running some tests, the doctors advised Jason's mother to transfer him to a higher-level hospital. I secretly went to speak with one of the doctors. To my surprise, he recognized me. "So your husband's that idiot who jumped into the sea for his mistress? Damn." Then he quickly added, "Sorry for your loss." He told me Jason likely had only about 3 months left to live. Of course, I didn't keep that to myself. I passed the news on to Jason's mother exactly as it was. She burst into sobs, wailing that she'd do whatever it took to raise the money to save him. I sighed and muttered, "Who knows what Emily said to Jason that made him pass out like that?" Mrs. Tang wiped her tears, her face darkening with rage, but she said nothing more. The next morning, I got a call from the police. I rushed to the station, only to find out that the night before, Mrs. Tang had shown up at Emily's place with a knife and chopped off both her feet. Even Emily's mother lost an arm. When I went to visit my mother-in-law, she seemed completely unhinged. She muttered incoherently, over and over again, "You shameless slut, sleeping with my husband, and then you have the audacity to let your daughter seduce my son. You filthy old hag, your daughter is a little whore." After a psychiatric evaluation, it was confirmed she had lost her mind. I paid out of pocket to have her committed to a psychiatric hospital. Then I had my lawyer notify Jason's father, who was still in prison. After all, we were one big family. How could I keep it from him? The prison later informed us that Jason's father, upon receiving the news, lost control and got into a violent fight with another inmate. His behavior was classified as severely disruptive, and his sentence would likely be extended. Once everything else was taken care of, I went to visit Jason's hospital room one last time. His eyes had gone completely cloudy, He stared at me for a long time before he finally seemed to recognize who I was. He smiled, but tears streamed down his face. Olivia, can you forgive me? I know I messed up. I was out of my mind. Emily, she told me I didn't have much time left. She wanted me to leave everything to her. God, I'm such a fool. I actually gave up on you for her. You trusted me so much. You did everything for me. How could I? How could I? I smiled gently and leaned close to whisper in his ear. Jason, do you believe in karma? Take a guess. Why do you think this life of yours turned out so miserable? He blinked in confusion for a moment. Then his eyes suddenly widened, horror flooding his face. You said you didn't come back. You lied to me. I laughed freely, without restraint. Then I told him, one by one, exactly what had happened to his parents and to Emily. If your mom hadn't gone crazy, I never would have discovered that Emily's mom was actually your dad's mistress. Can you believe it? She let the woman who ruined her marriage live in her house for 20 years. That's some next-level tolerance. I could never. Makes me wonder, is there a chance you and Emily share the same bloodline? Jason's trembling hand reached up weakly, trying to grab me, but I stepped out of reach. Why? I already said I was sorry. Why can't you forgive me? Why did you let me end up like this? Didn't you love me? I swear from now on, I'll love only you. Let's start over. Just use your money to get me treated, please. I shrugged casually. Too late, Jason. It's too late. The doctor already gave you a critical notice. You've only got a few days left. You should enjoy them while you can. I even thought about letting Emily visit you one last time, but she cursed you so viciously. No matter how much I tried to convince her, she refused. So much for childhood sweethearts and your great romantic love story. Not even worth a goodbye. Feeling regret now? Good. You should. Jason suddenly tried to sit up with all his strength, but he collapsed back onto the bed hard. The machines around him screeched with piercing alarms. Only when the nurses and doctors rushed in did I slowly step out of the room. A few hours later, after they had fought to save his life, the doctor came to speak with me. I'm sorry for your loss, he said gently. Loss? Of what?